Howdy everyone, this is ColeZR here, and I want to talk about Dark Knight. But before I do that, I just want to provide a bit of an intro of who I am, how long I've been playing this game, and just some of the little things about me since I'm pretty much a nobody in this space. Um, I have basically been playing since about mid Heaven's Ward. Had bid time on and off the game. Even though I did pre-order like a Realm Reborn with the Cat Sith minion I have here, didn't really play it here and then. Um, I have been tanking pretty much since I started when I picked the game back up in Heaven's Ward. The I am very much a casual player. I am not a high tier raider of any of these things. I have done some savages. I have touched savages in at least every expansion outside of Heaven's Ward, or not Heaven's Ward, a Realm Reborn. I didn't do any of the Coil Bahamut till basically doing the Wondrous Tales, pretty much. Um, for that being the introduction, kind of want to talk about Dark Knight and how I feel about it. Pretty much I how I feel about it is how a lot of people are. I'm just disappointed with it. But I want to say I probably go a bit further. I've actually been disappointed in this job since Shadowbringers. Um, I've kind of joked around saying that Dark Knight ended at between Stormblood and Shadowbringers. And what we got in Shadowbringers was not Dark Knight, it was Goon Knight, because it just became you just use all your OGCDs. You can say you have to do it in a certain order, you don't really have to. Even back during Endwalker, it wasn't super tight on it as long as you used all your OGCDs during the burst window. It did not matter. Um, and basically, what has happened is we have an extremely boring filler period of just one, two, three. And the reason I believe that Shadowbringers was the worst part for Dark Knight was because back during Stormblood, we had the ability to increase our skill speed a lot faster. Which means, instead of playing at a 2.5 GCD, we are now playing at a GCD that is so fast that you cannot double weave with Blood Weapon up. This was in the later past of Stormblood. But what has this caused a problem? It's because with Dawn Trail, with them taking out a lot of the OGCDs that we've had, we have basically been hollowed out. Um, we just don't have as much as now, and as I kind of say, we gooned at the start of Shadowbringers. We gooned super hard at Endwalker, and now that we've overgooned, we have basically broken ourselves in Dawn Trail, and we never got it fixed. And basically, we have now seen what is the current iteration of what happens, what you do when you strip the job of what the OCGs were. I understand that they were trying to do to make the job less busy, but what has caused a problem is it's just slow. And when in Stormblood, it was I would consider the fastest tank. And I know people will probably say, "Well, Gunbreaker is the fastest tank." Gunbreaker is not the fastest tank. Even if you put so much skill speed in it, it will never be as fast as Dark Knight during Stormblood with the skill speed build. Um, Gunbreaker is going at a V4 engine. Dark Knight with Blood Weapon was going at V12. There was a big difference between it. Um, in my opinion, Gunbreaker is a quick time tank, which is fine. They can provide that kind of quick instant test of your reflexes aspect of it. But it was not a fast tank. It just looks fast, but it ain't fast. It still runs, 2.4, 2.5, however way you want to say. I got 2.54. This is just because I have not upgraded my gear. It's just the Creedmoor gear from the Poetics. So it's just using whatever skill speed I had there. But Dark Knight could go so fast, it was almost like playing Monk or Viper or Ninja. It was basically around a 2 second GCD window. Honestly, it felt like you weren't playing Final Fantasy at this point in their time. You were playing you were also playing probably WoW with how fast the GCD was, because as I said, it was almost impossible to double weave without clipping your GCDs. And it's one of those things. Just like, all right, just don't double weave, just single weave. Um, but yeah, that's where I kind of feel some of the problems is with Dark Knight. Kind of probably talking about more of the in-depth problems. You know what? Big one everybody talks about is the Abyssal Drain and Carbon Split. And yeah, Carbon Split. Um, as I said, I agree. This needs to be probably separated from each other. I would honestly separate even further. This needs to be returned back to a GCD. How would I return it back to a GCD? I've heard people talk about it in comments of different videos. I've seen Xenos videos, Jmulls videos, Ronan's videos. I've seen a bunch of other people's videos, like AzuriteTV also, if I'm saying it right. Um, they've provided different suggestions. I've seen comments providing different suggestions. One idea I would personally like is you do Unleash, and you can either choose Stalwart Soul for Blood Gauge and MP, or you do Unleash into Abyssal Drain for HP and MP. Why MP instead of Blood Gauge? It's simply because I feel like Abyssal Drain is a more defensive option than Stalwart Soul. Because when I go into a dungeon, this is not an offensive cooldown, this is a defensive cooldown, even though it is very weak as a defensive cooldown. It's something to try to get me back up, especially when I pop Living Dead, which we're going to get to, because they have nerfed this ability in Dawn Trail. It was actually good after they reworked it in Endwalker, but they have decided to nerf it. I don't know if anybody else has noticed, but I have noticed. But yeah, I would say big thing. I know about putting Abyssal Drain. You know, we have two different combo enders on Dark Knight. Okay, we're unique. I don't believe there's anything wrong with having two different combo enders on a class. It's just to add a bit of flavor. In truth, you're just going to be using these in dungeons. Unless they ever make a raid where, you know, we have a bunch of ads. A2 is an example where you have a bunch of ads and everything, so, you know, you could use your DPS ability. Or in like a very rare instance of where your AoE is a gain on 2. Shadowbringers, if you were lucky, you could kill the Rock and Titan. And what was it, Eden 4 Titan Savage. So, you know, you can hit the Rock that was trap somebody, then you can trap and hit Titan at the same time. That was one of the few cases you could use the AoE, and it was neat, but for the most part, these are dungeon abilities. You're only going to be using when you're mass pulling. And I believe what this will help is with Death Knight sustainability. Death Knight sustainability is trash. Do I think Death Knight sustainability should be on the level of Warriors? No. I very much don't think it should be, but it does need a buff. It is terrible. It basically has no sustain. Its sustain is a joke. Alright, back to talking about more. So we have that. Let's go into Living Dead and talk about why I was saying that this has been basically nerfed in Dawn Trail. So we all know Living Dead. It was a shit ability when it first came out, and we've had it for so long. They finally gave it a bit of a rework in Endwalker. Endwalker, you know, you got to 0 health. You know, if you didn't have a white mage, you were spamming holy, and basically you were able to die essentially. But then what would happen is every AoE, everybody remembers if you were playing Dark Knight during this time and you got this rework. You used your AoE when you had the Walking Dead effect, and you would get your HP back, pretty much in either 1 or 2 GCDs. And basically, when that happened, is you would still keep getting your lifesteal. I don't know if anybody else has noticed, but I don't believe I have seen it yet, or I don't think I have seen it. Now in Dawn Trail, when you fulfill was it Undead Rebirth? Yeah, Undead Rebirth. If you fulfill this, you don't get that lifesteal anymore. Like you do not have any of that lifesteal. So in essence, I've seen people say, like, you know, I think people about, I think Season or whatever his name was, I don't know. Sorry, you know, I'm not trying to be not caring and everything. I just can't remember exactly. Someone was saying that this would be basically like home gang. Well, currently, right now, this is worse than home gang. This is home gang if Warrior did not have any of their abilities to just bring their health back up. They didn't have equilibrium, thriller battle, blood webbing, none of that. They don't have it. Because this is what would happen with Living Dead now. You go into a dungeon, you mass pull, you Living Dead. The white mage has, thankfully not casted holy, so you're able to, meet the requirement for, the invisibility effect. You get your HP up, and then you're just going to be knocked back down. And you now, being that Dark Knight has no sustain outside of Shadow Vigil, which I am glad we have this ability, but there is problems with it. It's definitely not as strong as the others, but hey, right now it's kind of a looking to gift horse in the mouth. I don't really want to do that. It's better than anything else we've gotten right now. But yeah, you would have to basically you have no way of getting your HP back up after the living or the undead rebirth effect is fulfilled. So basically, you're sitting at 1 HP if the healer is not paying attention. So you will just die and wipe the party. I kind of honestly think that with how Dark Knight is and its sustain being so bad, I've kind of really jokingly been telling myself that there should be a change to the TOS, that if you go into an expert roulette with Dark Knight and you have other tanks that you can run, you have a warrior, you have gunbreaker, you have paladin, if you have any of these other tanks at the level requirement and the gear requirement, if you're running Dark Knight, you should you should get banned for a day. That's just honestly how I feel like with Dark Knight. It almost feels like it's trolling, it's griefing. And if like you got reported by someone who was just being funny for reporting you for playing Dark Knight and griefing, I couldn't feel like I could defend that. Like, it is what it is. You're picking a super bad tank for a dungeon. I know you can do it, but it's just bad. I kind of compare it to Dark Knight is a bike with flat tires, and the 7.0.5 change, the old balance that they did, that was basically putting a gas engine on the bike with flat tires. Yeah, now we are, from last time I checked on the vlogs, we are the top in ADPS. Cool. It doesn't matter because we're going on a rocky, almost unstable bike. We're trying to lead the race on that. It's not fun. All right. So now that we've gotten that out the way, some of the talking about Living Dead, some talking about the dungeons. Let's talk about some of the other things with Dark Knight. Them taking away the plunge potency. I still actually have plunge on here. I do kind of agree. I don't mind utility abilities losing the potency on it. We should have gotten something back, but this is also still just kind of feeding into the current iteration of Dark Knight Dispense and Shadowbringers, and I am not a fan of the Shadowbringers Dark Knight. Gooner Knight is what I'm basically going to call it. Because that's what it is. Other things that really are, I think, very much a problem. Dark Knight it's in a weird spot. In my opinion, it's a flavor ability. But I also feel like it's where people say it's like we are the magic defensive tank. This was never the reason why we were the magic defensive tank. We were the magic defensive tank because in Heaven's Ward, when we had Delirium, before it was an OTGD, before it was basically an ability, it was a weapon skill that when you used it, it made the target dumber by reducing their intelligence by 10%. Basically kicked out Monk, but we were able to deal with magic damage because they also just dealt less magic damage to us because we bonked them on the head. This was nice, especially since a lot of the abilities were magic. But it's one of those things, like, if you ever have a fight like we have right now, where it's just useless, it's just useless. It's unlike Gunbreaker's Camouflage. Camouflage is better against physical abilities. Yes, because they have the 10% and then a parry chance. The problem is that, well, it's one of those things. With Camouflage, it still has 10% to deal with magic damage. It does not have, Dark Mind does not have any way to deal with physical damage. It would have been fine, say, I've seen Xenosys talk about that, make it 15% to all damage. I kind of feel like probably what I would do is either you have 20% magic vulnerability, 100% parry chance, because parry only does either between 13 to 17% damage reduction. I would do that. Other things is maybe make the 20% for magic vulnerability, 10% for all other damage. I'm also of the opinion that this should be a trait, and what the trait should do is that it just adds an additional magic defense. So I'd say extra 10% to all my defensive skills. So I say Rampart does reduces damage by 20%. I think what Dark Mind should do is that this should, if it's a magic damage attack, it will reduce it by 30. And I want to say it's reducing it by an additional, not the yeah, multiplicative problem with the when second defensive. Basically, it would be it's adding an additional 10% to the defensive. So Shadow Vigil, 50% magic damage resistance. Oblation, 20% magic damage resistance. Probably Reprise will have to keep it the same, because that's kind of just putting a debuff on the enemy. Alright, other things. Oblation. I've seen people talk about Oblation. I think Xeno says that it puts a regen on somebody. I mean, this would help with sustain. I'm also kind of the effect, or more of the mindset. What I would honestly like this ability to do is that if you put it on somebody, you give them blood price. For those who played like Shadowbringers and after, blood price was an effect, or it was an ability that when you used it, and every time you were hit, you would gain mana back. In Stormblood, they changed it up and everything where you couldn't use Blood Weapon and Blood Price at the same time. So you had like one was available in your tank stance, one was not available if you were in your tank stance. I think Blood Price was available if you were in your tank stance. Blood Weapon was available if you didn't have your tank stance up. So that's what I would like Oblation to do is you put it on a target, they gain the effect of Blood Price, and every time they're hit, say it's a stack effect like how Blood Weapon is now, 20 seconds, 5 stacks of Blood Price on them, they're hit, you gain, the Dark Knight gains 500, 600 MP back. Something like that. I don't think it's a bad idea right now with Dark Knight. I don't think you can have any bad ideas with how the job is right now. Salted Earth, it's very weird. It's like, I do like it for its flavor of, we are the only tank that puts it on an AoE. We're like Ninja with Doton. But it's also, it does feel like a bunch of filler. I probably would still keep it, but it does feel like there needs to be some little added effect to it. I know it used to have it in Stormblood. You'll probably hear me saying that quite a bit. TBN. I feel like TBN is, you have two camps with TBN. People who really, really like it, and people who absolutely hate it. I do want to kind of be more in the middle ground. I don't mind the cost of the MP. What I have a problem with it costing MP is that when it pops, and I know it's like, we have to pray that it pops. The problem that when it pops is that, we gain our TBN, we gain the ability to use a Edge of Shadow, and, it says, whoa, we gained our Edge of Shadow. We gained an IOU. We did not gain anything from it. Basically, we could have used the 3,000 on this, or the 3,000 on this. And, okay, we popped it. Okay, we basically got this. In my opinion, with this costing MP, there needs to be changes to it. I know there's been talks about maybe reducing the mana cost, or, taking out the mana cost. Different things like that. I feel like it should be with mana cost. If it's going to cost mana, and they don't want to do anything to say Edge of Shadow itself, this should be half the cost, if not just taken out. But if they want to make this cost MP, then make it half. Because if you make it half, then it's like, hey, I gained Edge of Shadow when it pops for half the price. That's a deal. Other things I would honestly say to do if they change Edge of Shadow, make it where when this pops, because the biggest problem is that as it's an IOU. What they should do to Edge of Shadow when TBN pops, increase the potency by, I don't know, 140 and everything. Make it 500. Or not 500, 600 potency on it, on the next attack. Make it also do an auto-direct crit on the next one you use. That way it does feel like it was a payoff. The one aspect of Dark Knight and everything that I feel that has stayed in the job has been the counterattack. For those who don't know, in Heaven's Ward, you pretty much wanted to be the main tank. And the reason why you wanted to be the main tank is because you had more potency abilities you could use attacks on. you had reprisal before. It was a class roll ability. And what it did was every time you parried, or it had a cooldown, but when you parried, you could use it. It did damage to them and reduced their damage. Basically, it does kind of what it does now, just it had the damage part, and you can only use it after a parry. You can only parry if you were the main tank. Also, low blow. Low blow actually had a very funny effect with the parrying system. So, you're main tanking, you parry, you low blow, and then you also parry again. There was, I think a 30% chance of when you parried, your low blow would come off cooldown. So you could use your low blow more often when you were main tanking. Now, this provides problem with design. This is actually a big reason why in Heaven's Ward, one of the big classes you always brought was Warrior. Why did you bring Warrior? Few reasons. It's slashing debuff, and it did not have two main tank. Yes, it had the pre-version of Damnations, I think Vengeance, or whatever it is it's called, but it had this. It wasn't all that strong to say, all right, they're going to attack back for 50 potency. It wasn't that strong enough, especially when the boss is not auto attacking all that much. That's what that. But with Paladin, you could not really. The only time you could run Paladin and Dark Knight is if you got into the Duty Finder and you queue up for normal raids or something like that, or trials, and yeah, your co-tank was a Paladin. If you were a Dark Knight and everything, there was nothing you could do about it. But that was that's to me a part of the Dark Knight and everything was the counterattack. They go into Stormblood, and they try to calm down on this whole, because I do agree that the whole main tank off tank should not be a hard requirement, because that's what it was in Heaven's Ward. It was basically a hard requirement. Basically, Dark Knight wanted to be attacking the boss as much as possible. Paladin wanted to be hit by the boss as much as possible. Warrior could not care. In fact, they were probably wanting to stay in their DPS stance the most, so they could do as much DPS as possible. So they were going to stay in their DPS, so they also wanted to off-tank the most. But Dark Knight Paladin wanted to main tank. Go into Stormblood. What they do, we get TBN. Now, what does TBN do during Stormblood? I know I've seen people kind of get this wrong, saying that this was added in Shadowbringers. This was not added in Shadowbringers. We have the Shadowbringers version, but we did not get this in Shadowbringers. We got this in Stormblood. And in Stormblood, it didn't cost mana. It had a 25-second cooldown, which all the other tanks run at now. And what it did was when it popped, you would gain 50 gauge. Why would you gain 50 gauge? So what you could do? You could use your Blood Spiller. Delirium used to cost blood gauge, because when you used Delirium, it didn't, provide Blood Spiller effect and everything. Basically, you couldn't sit there and use your Blood Spiller over and over like you do now. Basically, it's in a release. It wasn't that back then. Back then, Blood Weapon was on cooldown, and what it did was increase the speed of your attacks, provide you mana every attack, and all that. Also provided blood gauge when you used it. But what Delirium did back then was it increased the duration of your Blood Weapon. So when you pop Blood Weapon and then use Delirium, I think you gained about 23 seconds of Blood Weapon. So you're in a very fast stance or a very fast attack pattern, or GCD pattern, whatever, for about 23 seconds. And out of all the tanks and everything, none of them could really get to that speed. They wanted to kind of have some of the speed for the late weaving thing that they pretty much have gotten rid of for the most part, especially at least with Dark Knight and Warrior, where we kind of basically lost the 5 Blood Spiller Spell Cleave effect. But that is where I am with TBN. TBN I feel like it needs to push more on its counterattack design, because right now with its counterattack design, it's just an IOU. You use the MP and you just get refunded the MP, and there's no real gain outside of you have this ready. Your dark side is got a decent amount of duration on it. Your MP is not capped, but it's decently high to use inside of the 2-minute burst window. And that's where it is right now. It's just one of those things that it just does not feel great. It feels like I got an IOU, and not felt like, hey, I got something neat. One of the fun things I actually was doing in Endwalker was in the 24 mans. I can't remember the exact name, but it was the last one, the last raid, and it was the boss with the bow. I see I could pop like a defensive, like a rampart, TBN, and I could just stay in the AoE and get hit by the AoE. And the only time that would feel like it was a game is just because I didn't have to back away from the boss. I could just stay on them, and I was using my GCDs. I wasn't getting a gain from this. I was getting a gain from this. That's not how I feel a counterattack should be. Counterattack should really be more of an instant thing. So I feel like if they want to keep Blackest Night kind of how this is, it needs to provide a bonus to this. Outside of you get a free version of it. It needs to be increase the potency, make it a direct hit crit automatically. Because right now it's not fun to use TBN. Because it's also one of those things. If you do that, then Dark Knight would be a little bit easier to play in dungeons, or like a little bit safer to play in dungeons. Because if you kill the enemies fast enough and everything, then yeah, you're not taking damage. Well, that doesn't happen. All right. Moving on. Living Shadow is kind of an alright ability. Them taking out the blood gauge is for the prequel. That's fine, but it is very much a set it or forget it ability. Basically, it's a set it and forget it. And it's pretty much Scourge. It's a 2-minute Scourge. For those who don't know, at Heaven's Word, we had a GCD dot called Scourge. It had a really cool animation. But yeah, this is what this is. And it's honestly just not all that great, because if the enemy gets away, it's going to use Shadow Stride. I think Azurite talked about this. About it will sit there and use Shadow Stride. Well, because it uses Shadow Stride, it loses an attack potency, and so you can lose these potencies here because it's gotta last for a duration, which I very much think they need to change. It needs to be like how Machinist is, where Machinist's robot has, I don't know, I haven't played Machinist at max level yet, really, but I just know and everything. It used to had a thing where you could end it early because the boss was going to transition and basically be untargetable, unhittable. So that way you can get like, okay, here, I'm going to get the bit of potency out of this ability. It may not be the most optimal thing, but hey, it's better than this. Now you've only done 2 hits and no big finisher. I think this needs to happen with Living Shadow. Other things I also say with Living Shadow, to help provide for the group utility, if anybody's done the Stormblood Dark Knight quest, you know about the, basically our guilty conscience that follows us. I think Living Shadow should also bring out the guilty conscience and basically heal the party. Basically, we have Frey hitting the boss, and then I can't remember the kid's name, but basically they're healing the party. So we're a bit like we're just a DPS short of a light party. I would honestly kind of like that. The Disesteem part and everything, I do think that's nice. It feels weird that it is a GCD ability when this is a no GCD. Especially like when you have Salted Earth, and then it's got Salt and Darkness, and they're both OGCDs. That's just how some things are. How I feel about some of the things with Dark Knight right now. The other things, I do believe that could be a quick band-aid fix. As people have talked about with the Delirium Blood Weapon stacking, I don't mind this change, but the fact that they have taken out the stacks and then not given back the mana, like we did lose a bunch. We did not need to lose this much. I think there was bad communication on this. I don't know if they had 2 people working on the Dark Knight design or what. I don't know if Mono was like, yeah, you know what, I agree with the Healer Strike thing, and they decided to make Dark Knight the worst when it was already the worst. As far as staying and getting damage out. Outside, Endwalker, yeah, it was high in the parses. Delirium and the blood weapon stacks. The easy fix for this is just make the blood weapons give 1,000 MP each. You do that, you fixed it. It's the easiest thing to do. It's not hard. I know people are making a big deal about it. It's one thing. It does suck, but it is really an easy fix we just need them to fix it. I do think that's probably like some of my biggest gripes. There is talking about, Dark Missionary could possibly do something for physical damage, especially with this raid tier that's pretty much majority of physical. But this is pretty much my biggest gripes with Dark Knight. Personally, what would I do to Dark Knight to fix it? If the biggest identities I feel is counterattack. It still has this. It needs to be improved. The other thing was its speed. It had speed in Heaven's Ward and Stormblood. How would I do this? Would I provide the blood weapon effect and everything how it was? No. I would not do it that way. I personally feel like what we should do is we get stances back for Dark Knight. Now, I'm not saying we get a tank stance and then a DPS stance. We're not having that anymore. Basically, you use this if you have an aggro, and then you pop it later on during a fight so you can get aggro, so in case you get targeted for the tank buster and it's not on the DPS. I would say what it is, you would have one stance to say a controlled stance. The controlled stance is an MP generation stance. You have another stance. What is this other stance? It is a more like firstly physical stance. And what it's doing is it's using up your MP for faster GCDs. Your controlled stance is at 2.5 GCD. The offensive stance, as I was talking about, would be 2-second GCD. I think honestly that way it's like so you feel like you're faster. You're hitting more buttons as this goes. Because we see Viper and Monk and all that and everything. It's like, why do people find them fun? Because the GCDs can be pushed more. I'm not entirely sure about Monk, but that's also one reason I do enjoy Monk is because I can just push the buttons fast. And that's to me like the problem with Dark Knight is that it's very slow, and I think it needs to be sped up. And if you do the stances, you can kind of alleviate the latency issue that you possibly could have with some people and everything who may have latency problems. And with 2 GCD, or I don't know, maybe somebody else needs to tell me. But I know with Monk and everything, you can still double weave at a 2-second GCD. I would say you just couldn't go faster than a 2-second GCD. That way you can still do the double weaving, but it's much faster than what we currently have now. And I don't know if either having it as a separate button like that, or maybe we could have, say, a GCD ability that switches the stances. I think that would also be pretty neat. And basically, and as I was going to kind of talk about a bit more, in your controlled stance, every ability is restoring mana. You do that, and so that way you can kind of get this built up faster. Would it be 600? Probably not. It'd probably be maybe like 300 or something. But as I said, it's going on every GCD because the only filler GCD that's given us mana back is Siphon Strike and Stalwart Soul. These are the only GCD abilities that's given us mana back. And in our offensive stance, the quick stance, as I would probably have to call it, I'm going to call it the offensive stance. The offensive stance is every time you use an attack, it's going to be like TP. Basically, the difference is that you can at least generate this back up. Basically, this is going to be like a melee version of a black mage. As a black mage and everything, they use their fire spells, drain out their MP, then they go into ice and they use their ice spells to get their MP back up. Be something similar like that, except we're kind of attacking really fast. I wouldn't say potency increases. It's just very fast attack speed. It's free attack speed instead of melding for skill speed or going after skill speed. Because even though I like the skill speed build in Stormblood, having to sit there and stat for that when if you want to play another tank, it causes so much problems. I think honestly, if we just had a stance that just increased our GCD naturally, it'd be fine. And maybe make it and everything that if we get any extra skill speed with it, it gets turned into a weaker version of Determination. It gets turned into bonus damage, just not as much as Determination. Just so any skill speed that you naturally get from gear, it gets added to damage. That's what I would do for the offensive stance, like that. Further on, I was also playing with the idea of bringing back Dark Arts. What I would bring back as Dark Arts, I would not bring it back as a DPS ability. It would be back as a utility ability. So basically, what we had in Heaven's Ward and Stormblade, you would pop Dark Arts, and Dark Arts did different things. Actually, I believe if you Dark Darts the Abyssal Drain, you would actually get the HP back. So basically, if you used it naturally and everything, you didn't get any HP back. I think that was actually a Dark Arts effect. I may have to double check and everything, or if somebody else wants to double check it, I'll probably double check it after a bit. But I think you had to Dark Arts this to gain HP back. So moving on, what would I do with Dark Arts? So with Dark Arts, you pop Dark Arts, and it would say Soul Eater. You Dark Arts Soul Eater. It wouldn't increase the damage of it, but it would increase the cure potency. So it's like, this is 300 right now. You Dark Arts it, it's say 1,000. So we have a little bit more sustain in that regards. If we go, say, with my idea of taking Abyssal Drain, a second combo ender between, Abyssal Drain and Stalwart Soul, Dark Arts Abyssal Drain, you gain more HP back. Different things like that. I think I played with an idea of, say, you Dark Arts Shadow Stride, you gain TBN for free. And it had maybe an extended range on, so instead of the 20 yards, it was 30 yards, even though you probably wouldn't need the 30 yards, but maybe for, like, pulling in a dungeon and everything, because, yeah, this is, like, 25 yards, this is 20 yards, so this would be faster. You gain a free shield on it. Cool. That's what I would do with Dark Arts. Just add something to some of these abilities to provide effects. I probably would have to sit there and make another video a little more about Dark Knight, but this is just kind of some of my ideas. I am not entirely happy with the job, even though I do like Dark Knight. It does feel, it's hollow, but to me, it's been hollow since Shadowbringers. It's not that I disliked Shadowbringers all that much, or the Endwalker design, but I saw the problems with it. And it was the extremely slow filler combo that we had. And it's just, I knew that something like this could just happen. Like, if they strip too much away, yeah, this is basically what we're left with. And I know it's like, yeah, why focus so much on the Soul Eater combo? Because these are the buttons you're pressing most of the time. And if this is just not fun, it's not fun. It's not like with, say, Gunbreaker. With Gunbreaker, yeah, you have only really one major combo that you do, but you gain a charge every time. With Dark Knight, you have to use this. If you don't use anything outside of it, you have to use this 3 times to gain enough gauge to use it. To use, say, a Blood Spiller or something like that. Alright. That's kind of all I have to say about Dark Knight. Alright. Catch y'all later. Maybe I'll have some reactions to this video. This is the big topic to talk about right now, so maybe I'll get pushed in the algorithm. Maybe this is the start of my FF14 journey. Maybe I'll talk about some other things here soon. And probably with a bit more practice and everything, since this is my first video. Alright. Y'all take care, and have a good one.